Hello, everybody.
Hello.
That's very good. My name's Jules Carroll. I'm from Relationships Australia, Tasmania, and I'm going to chair this session and the next session. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Wendy Groot, who's the CEO of Mental Health Carers Tasmania, and has a broad understanding, expertise, and set of skills and knowledge around both, I suppose, the circumstances of carers, but mental health issues per se. And Wendy's going to spend some time this afternoon talking to us about a really interesting project that they've carried out, which is about hearing the stories of some of those people who are caring for people with mental health issues and what those stories reveal. So, can't wait. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Jules. Hi. Just to start with, I won't assume that you know who Mental Health Carers Tasmania is, so I'll just give you a bit of a quick look at who we are. I've been in the role for just over 4 years now. When I came into the organisation was entering into a new phase in terms of its funding agreements, but also its identity and its focus and its presence, trying to up its presence nationally as well. The organisation was originally called ARAFME, which is the Association of Relatives and Friends of the Mentally Ill. And after about not very long, it was clearly evident that our branding was a significant issue for us. And I would get on the phone and I would say, Mental Health Carers, no, Association of Relatives and Friends of Mentally Ill, and people would go, what? So I'd say it again, and they go, what? So we got to the point where it was really evident that there's a 30-year history with ARAFME across Tasmania, and ARAFME exists nationally in other places as well. But it came quite clear that we needed to be able to work out what our message was about who we were and rebrand ourselves to reflect that. And so we went through a whole lot of processes of talking with all sorts of people in the public sector, private sector, business sector, carers, consumers, state health services. So I went through a major process about what is it that we are and what is it that we want to be. And then we realised that if we just say who we are, which was Mental Health Carers Tasmania. So we did that, and then as a transition of bringing in the past into the present and moving forward with what was the strength and what we valued, I haven't bought the really big banners out of the car because it's too rainy to go back twice, so I only bought the 2 banners. But you'll see on the bottom of the banner where our logo is, it's a tree. That tree was the original image that was part of ARAFME's history. But as the years went on, the tree that was in the middle of all our badging just looked like a splodge that had gone all weird. So we engaged with a graphic designer and we said, can you ask people to tell us what the tree's about? And it was about place of comfort, place of rest, place of regeneration, place to sit and talk. And so we incorporated that part of our past into our image. And we have another pull-up banner that actually has graphic images on it. They're sort of cartoon kind of figures about people sitting under a tree across the ages. You can't identify particularly who they are because they're not photographs. I tend to be somebody that has a bit of an issue with photographs because when I look at a photo, I can automatically make an assessment, a bit like what was being said in there this morning about the man sitting next to on the plane. So our banners have been very good. So as I said, we work across the state, and we're national members with Mental Illness Fellowship Australia, which David mentioned this morning, but we're also the national members for Mental Health Carers ARAFME Australia. They really got both names mixed up. And we're also the Tasmanian partners with the My Networks initiative, which is a 1-800 number that operates in over how many doors now, David? About 100 doors, and it's a guarantee of service. If you ring that 1-800 number anywhere, you are guaranteed to receive particular services. That's been at the initiative of MIFA and have done that really on a smell of an oily rag. And we're also hosting 3 forums on our website at the moment. 2 of those are SANE forums. One is a consumer forum and one is a carer forum. and they're moderated, and they're proving to be really successful. And then there's another one about our national voice, which is the Mental Health Carers ARAFME forum, and that's about posting your story. So we've sort of stepped a little bit into social media, but I'm not a great fan of Facebook and those sorts of things as yet. I've heard too many scary stories about that, including one of my own. So that's a bit of a quick brief on it. And my phone's on here because it's my clock. So I'm not doing this because I'm checking my phone, it's because I'm checking my clock. So I'll just give you a bit of a background as to why we engaged in the project. And some of you may know that the previous government to the present created a Tasmanian carers policy and a Tasmanian carers action plan. And two of my goals in that process was try to get an understanding of mental illness and mental ill health into both that policy and that plan, because the original draft didn't have anything in it in relation to mental health challenges from a carer's perspective. And the other goal that I was trying to achieve was there is a Premier's Disability Advisory Council that exists, and I lobbied for a bit over 2 years to get a mental health person voice within that council as well, because that didn't exist either. So we were successful in both of those. But one of the things that I discovered in the process of the carers policy and the action plan being put together was that we didn't actually have any Tasmanian statistics or evidence or stories that could be validated within that policy and that action plan. What we had was figures that were extrapolated from all of the national figures across disability broadly, nothing specifically on mental health. So, and we had a number of people that anecdotally we were hearing particular issues that were being raised in relation to carers. So I put together a business plan and a project proposal around that, about us developing some position papers and some statements and some really good Tasmanian data around the mental health space from a carer and a consumer perspective. I put the proposal to Tasmania Local. This was the year before last, so this was 2013 it started. And at beginning of, I can't remember when it started, but Tasmania Locals agreed to fund the project, which was exciting because it was ticking some of their boxes around what they were trying to understand around the transition pathways, government policies, a whole lot of things that they were trying to look at doing, and their population health approach. On the 30th of June 2014, we were to sign off on the document. What happened was we had the document all set up and the proposal, and Tasmania Local agreed to it. It took 12 months. And then we had a change of government, and the new government decided that Tasmania Local was only allowed to provide grant funding of up to a maximum of $20,000. Our project was costed at $39,000. We formed a partnership with COTA, which is Council on the Ageing, because older Tasmanians were, again, anecdotally people that were telling us a lot of their stories and their stress. And we also partnered with Carers Tas for obvious reasons. And Carers Tas are also facilitating the process around the Carers Advisory Group that exists to roll out the policies. We were to meet with them at 2 o'clock to sign the contract. At something like 10 to 5 to 2, they said, no, we're not going to do it. And then we had this announcement of the funding. So what we decided to do was to go to COTA. I was thinking very quickly on my feet and said to COTA, would you manage the consultants' costs that come in just under 20, and I'll manage the project costs that come in under 20, and we'll split the grant. Tasmania Locals agreed to that, and again we were signing off, and at the last minute they changed their mind. But I didn't stop because I'm pretty determined when I get an idea in my head. So I we came into the next financial year, this current one, and I just kept going back to Tasmania Local, and then they agreed to the project. So we launched the project at our 30th birthday in October last year. The aim of the project, I've got a handout for you to take as well, but the summary there is pretty well our findings. So the 4 areas that we wanted to explore thoroughly were the impact on mental health carers in current government policies, that's both state and federal. the needs of mental health carers in relation to the transfers of care for their loved ones. So that's transferring in and out of clinical settings into community settings, through the GPs, through psychs, those kind of pathways was that one. The living arrangements for people with mental ill health on their carers, because we were hearing lots of stories about the impact of what were happening for people as consumers maintaining their own home, but also on carers being able to maintain their own home as well, because many people, because of the lack of housing options for people struggling with mental ill health, they were moving back into their homes, and there were a whole lot of problems that were being associated with that. And the last one, which is called Caring a Job and a Half, was what's the impact on mental health carers and what's the impact on consumers around being able to maintain work, being able to do those balances, what are workplaces like in relation to those kinds of support. Our goal was to produce 4 position papers. My expectation was maybe 6 pages on each one. In order to have a good sample size in relation to the population, our goal was 100 online surveys and 30 face-to-face interviews, and then people could submit their own as well. We achieved 97 online surveys and 24 face-to-face, which I really didn't think we'd get to the mark. The really interesting thing about it as well is we chose to do a public media campaign, so we advertised it in the very front parts of the papers in the 3 parts of the state. From my knowledge of the names and the regions, over 3/4 of the people came through that external advertising, not through carers that were on our database, which ticked the other agenda that I had in my head. Wouldn't it be great to talk to and hear the voice of some of those carers that describe themselves as hidden carers or don't like the title? Lots of people don't like the title because they say it's my mother, it's my brother, it's my neighbour, it's my best friend, it's my workmate. I do it because I care about them, not because I'm a carer. So we were really excited we got all those stories. So before I go into giving you the detail, I wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the issues that we have. We had one of the really big issues, and it'll be evident to you in a moment, is that it was really hard to get carers to actually have their voice for them. Their voice was a lot around the person that was struggling with the mental illness and trying to get those areas sorted rather than saying my needs, which is a typical issue that we know, trying to get my needs as a carer met because my needs aren't as important as the person who's going through all this struggle. So we were trying really hard to work through that. And language became a really important component for us about how we asked questions, how we surveyed them. We developed I don't like the word, but a reference group that consisted of carers as well as members from those partner organisations, and we workshopped the questions for ages. So we started the project launched it in the middle of October, and we concluded the survey process at the end of January. We were a bit caught out because Tasmania Care Locals took so long to get the process started and we had a time frame, but we put it through that process, closed the online surveys at the end of January, and then worked like Billy-O for our launch date, which we did push out a little bit, because we've ended up with 4 ginormous documents of they're almost 30 pages each. The amount of information is just phenomenal that we achieved through this. We also understand, and the amount of media that was produced through these and the launch of them is great. The paper that talks about the government policies is being picked up nationally in a number of places at the moment, which is really exciting, and hopefully through the conversations that have started with MIFA, we might be able to look at initiating some of the findings in here. So I'll just show you this brief. I'm going to show you a slideshow. It intentionally does not have any sound to it. So there's no music, there's no talking, it's purely a slideshow. The reason I haven't put any voice or any music to it is I really would like to encourage you to enter into the stories that people are saying without being distracted by those other things. So it goes for about 5 minutes. And I said there's no talking. I'm told if I press this button it'll work. Can't get it back up. Don't worry about it. as you can probably sense, it was a very important process for us to remember that, as this is called, the whole goal for us out of this was being able to advocate for a more compassionate society. We knew a lot of those stories. There weren't a lot of surprises. We could have chosen to go down the pathway of only telling that story. We chose not to do that. In the front of... and we chose... Oh, it's probably time to hand this out. I'm just going to talk through this. This is just the summary. What we chose to do was to say, okay, if we're going to make it be... so these are... We asked... Carers have been saying to us that they were wanting to have their voice. They've been saying a lot of these things. Our phone calls tell us that. Our workshops tell us that. And so we wanted to get as I said, the evidence base to give them a voice. Said we were overwhelmed by the length and the level that people went to tell their stories. I said most people, it was all voluntary. There was no coercion to try to get people to do it. And one of the things that we had, along with those statements, we had, I can't tell you how many thank yous for giving us the opportunity to do this. And we, in the front of of each of the reports, there's a quote that kind of hung us together through the beginning. And this was what helped us to keep that focus on how do we build this compassionate society, how do we advocate, how do we make a difference, how do we not point the fingers at state government or clinical service and say you've got to fix it. So the quote that we had in the front of all that was in the front cover. It says, "We would like to sincerely thank all the mental health carers in Tasmania who took part in the Caring Voices project in 2014-15. We heard your stories of love, hope, frustration and despair. Through the Caring Voices project, we will work together to make Tasmania a better place to be a mental health carer." And the quote that we have is a quote by a guy called Victor Siddle. And the quote is, "Statistics are people with the tears washed off." And that was very much what we wanted to do, is to say that these are people here, front and centre. It's not a label, it's not a carer, it's not somebody with schizophrenia, it's a person front and centre. And we wanted to maintain that focus the whole time. One of the other things that we also said very clearly, and I'll need to look at me here, is one of the other statements that we wanted to make really strong and upfront was that, and it's in the bio, what you've got in your magazine here is the consultant and I decided that we wanted to try to operate in a different kind of space to try to get some of the messages out. So those of you who are from Hobart or get the Mercury will be aware that the Mercury has a thing called turning points. So I just sort of, in Wendy's cheek, just said to Miriam, why don't we write one? Thinking it's no way it would get in. And it got in. It got in Saturday's paper about 3 weeks ago, I think it was. And I opened the paper and went, oh, that's my name. And I got quite excited. And that's the kind of energy that I've discovered that's out in the community, that people do want to start to engage with this, they do want to start to talk about it. One of the things, and I'll just read from that as well, is that it's been very clear for me in all the messages that we've been giving is it's not just for the health system to deal with mental ill health. It can't fix it only through that mechanism. That's one way. It needs a really true commitment of working together and recognising that help's determined by many factors. And many of those lie outside the mental health system. And many of those are beyond the control of an individual. So we looked at governments to take leaderships, we look for me to take leaderships, we look for you to take leadership and start to advocate for the change that we want. So because of that, we then had really big dilemmas about, do we really want to put all those stories in that people are telling us? And we're going, no, they wanted to tell us. They wanted us to know because they want to be part of the solutions that help to move us forward. So what we chose to do then was to, as you'll see, the reports are out, and they're on our website if you want to look at them. Really, they're amazing. They're quite inspiring reading in lots of ways, and giving us the information that we really need so that we can do some really good advocacy and encouraging people to have a bit more of a voice. At the launch at Parliament House in April this year, we had about 80 people in the room. We had every sitting state politician, which I've never achieved before. I've had a lot in the room before. We actually had the Premier came in and stayed and talked and walked around the room and wanted these. We had a couple of federal and the independents in the room. So the energy around wanting to bring some change and to hear these voices, and it was... You stole my line this morning, David, because one of my lines, I was glad you said it, one of my lines that I was going to say was that politicians will listen to carers. There's the way that they tell their story, they really want to know about it, and carers aren't doing it as saying, poor old me, they're saying poor all us. It's not just about the carer or the family member, it's actually about all of us and all the issues that exist for all of us, and that's what their voice is very strong. So we decided that we really needed to do that. We made some changes in the report in terms of de-identifying a lot. There were a lot of people that wanted to name things, and we said, no, that's not responsible to do that. So we de-identified as, so there's no names in any of the reports, so we didn't want to distract from the issue. When we first started to go through this process, the goal was we'll put this report and then we'll put 2 or 3 recommendations at the end. And we were sitting there struggling with that, and the particularly confronting one, which is deliberately on the side, and it's consistent with another comment you made this morning about institutions. There are people out there that are so frightened and so desperate and can see no end to anything other than bringing people back into an institution, because they think that's the only way they can be protected, the person with the mental illness as well as the family members. And that's a really confronting thing for us as a community, to try to think, well, okay, if that's the level of fear and concern and anxiety and lack of people being able to navigate the care that they need, that's a really pretty loud thing for us to hear. And I think that's why it's deliberately there. They're quite provocative statements, and certainly as the working group were working through the papers, I think I don't know how much rewriting, but I know that the consultant and I were pretty well. It was quite ginormous, so I'm ready for a holiday. But what we decided, that rather than put recommendations, because putting recommendations in a report, you'll just get your thumbs up and they'll say, so what? So rather than that, and recognising that again, it's not the mental health system alone that fixes mental health issues in the community, we decided we want to put some calls to action. So you'll see in that summary, they're the calls to actions. We decided we didn't want any more than 4 or 5 because it was impossible to do anything with. So those calls to action are for all of us. Mental Health Carers TAS is not the person who's using this as a tool for us to lobby our organisation or whatever else. We're absolutely stoked that we've been able to do it on under $40,000, that it is being picked up nationally and in the state. And so what we've in the process of doing at the moment, and I'm starting down the pathway, is we're looking at finding not a lot, but an amount of money from another organisation, that there's a few that have picked this up, to actually be able to use the consultant to put together possible scenarios around all of the calls to action. So how might an organisation respond to a call to an action? How might an individual, how might a family member, how might a person living with a mental illness? And look at ways that we can respond to these calls to action. So that's the phase where we are at the moment. We think these documents are living documents and will be for quite some time, and we're really keen to work with whomever we can to make this work. One of the other things that I just quickly, and then I'll stop if you've got any questions, one of the things that I also had as a goal in this process was, if at all possible, could we find some stuff that's working really well, that's not complicated, that's not expensive, that's some initiative, not necessarily from an organisation, but something that shows how we can do this better. And the consultant came to me one day and she said, "Oh, Wendy, I've just had a 2.5 hours interview with a business and I'm not sure whether they fit in the category or not." And I said, "Tell me about it." And then I got quite excited by the end of the conversation. What the consultant had been approached by was a workplace, small rural community, and the manager in that workplace had chosen to take on a workplace-friendly and mental health space, so she would take her manager's hat off. Rural community, she was confronted with people who were living with mental illness themselves, early onset of things like depression and anxiety as a result of their caring roles, DV, drug and alcohol issues, a whole whack of significant issues. So she chose to go through mental health first aid training. She chose to connect with my organisation and chose to also skill herself about having referral pathways, so working out who she needed to talk to where so that she could be a referral pathway. She's made a significant impact in life on many people. She's now being used, I think since she spoke at Government House when we launched this project. We also had a mum who came and told her story as well, of her 3 children. And we really wanted to try to be, it's really easy to be really emotive in this stuff, and we wanted to kind of keep the head and the heart nicely balanced. Some of what we've been hearing in there this morning about the technological change or the adaptive change. So I've kind of got a box to put it in now, because we really wanted to do that kind of stuff. So that she's, since that time of her speaking at the launch and the mum, that organisation has embraced, a statewide organisation. The state manager is now embracing it as a possible process and practice in all of those workplaces across the state. And we also hope that we might be able to pick up some of that kind of partnership with them as well to keep on promoting it. She's had 4 speaking engagements where she's been going and telling a story. So it's been really fantastic. And she was awarded the Tasmanian Community Suicide Prevention Network Life Award for best practice in the workplace. So it's very exciting. So it was really good being able to have a little bit of beacon on the hill to say, it's not what she's doing isn't rocket science. She's just working from her heart. And wanting to try to make a difference in the pond she's in. So I talk about it as being, she rang me one day and she tossed the stone into the pond, and then look at all these ripples that are happening out of just this one little story that is actually a ginormous story, and the impact, because people can identify with it, they can see how they can associate what they can do, and how sometimes it's not this major transformational change, sometimes it's just deciding that you're going to toss the rock in the pond and seeing what happens. So these are all on our website. I'm conscious that I have 10 minutes left, and I did want to leave you with some questions if you had any. But these are all on our website. If you want to know anything more about it or want to talk more about it, I'm very happy to come and do that with any of you at any time. And if you've got any ideas about how you might be interested in engaging with this, that'd be fantastic. I'd love to do that, because I think that they're really quite powerful documents that can have a really good life. So if you've got any questions, I'll try. I'll tell you who it is. It's the Brown store in Longford, and they're an IGA store. Yeah, so. But it was people that were employed there, so people would come and say, she tells lots of stories, but come in, I need to have some time off because the person I'm looking after has got a whole lot of medical appointments, can I do it? I'm really exhausted, I can't do shifts this day, I need to go and sort this out. And she's got this wonderful, flexible way of putting the employee in the centre of making decisions about how they can be at their best and their healthiest, both in the workplace but also in their community and in their home. So. That's it.
I was just going to say, that was really, like I said, about being very emotive, those quotes and everything, when I was watching it. And it is quite technical, isn't it? It goes, the information that you've written about. How did you get to write such technical from the emotion?
I think just good luck, I think. I think, again, it was about all the way through, from the beginning designing of this project all the way through, I was very much wanting to keep a head and a heart balance and recognise that we were dealing with incredible stories about people's lives that... And the consultant says, and we don't say this again not to be emotive, but just to show the depth of how people shared, not one person that she did a telephone or a face-to-face interview with did not cry. And they were many, and she said they weren't all crying out because they were depressed or awful. Some of them were crying because, thank you, I can actually now have my voice. I can actually tell you what's going on. I can see what you're doing. So it wasn't, it was that kind of a release of here's some way that we can work with your story. So that's why if you have a look at these, you'll see that they are very sprinkled through with a lot of people's stories, and then we've tried to gather that together with other national data that's been done, and trying to work that through. And at the moment we look like we might be in a spot where we can actually have the evidence to say whether this is the first of its kind like this across Australia, and then leverage off about that a little bit more about what we might do. So there's somebody's allocating one of their staff, one of the politicians actually is allocating their staff person to do a bit of a literature review for us. So that's for free. So that's really quite good too, because they said, yeah, we'd really like to know that too. So, and we think, being a proud Tasmanian, as some of you in the room probably are, we feel like we've really punched above our weight on this one. So we're really proud of it. If you want to know about us a bit more, here we are here.
Can I just make a point? This is just an observation. I'll hold it up, I guess. Anne Fitzgerald. I'm a social worker and setting up a psychiatry practice with my husband Ian Wilson in Hobart. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, I've had to sit down and study the MBS schedule, and so obviously both from experience, people who are coming to already in Hobart, but also just from observing and hearing the stories of friends who have partners, relatives with severe mental illness. So this whole issue as to where the carers really fit into the support. So essentially, okay, we can bulk bill patients. There are only a couple of Medicare schedule items where you can actually see the carers, so that other person comes and sees you. You can see them an unlimited number of times in the initial assessment stage, but beyond that, in the continuing treatment of the individual, it is limited to 4 visits per year.
That is identified in the research.
Okay, great.
And I'd love to get your contact.
Sure.
Is there something else that we're doing?
Sure, no, I'd be happy to talk to you. It's just something that's actually become quite apparent because obviously, as you know, in many cases, the parents or the partners are like an essential part of the team. So with a colleague in interstate who has a partner with severe ongoing mental illness, essentially he has become a patient of the psychiatrist himself, and his partner really won't come to see the psychiatrist, or has to, it's very difficult to get her along. So he's actually the one who sees the psychiatrist to essentially understand how to really deal, with the partner with the severe problems. So yeah, I'd be happy to chat with you because I think that there could be some advocacy around that area. Yeah.
One of the things that it's two quick answers. I'd really like to connect with you. But one of the things that we've discovered is often the carer and the consumer, that used to be like this, and now it can often be no divide. It could be the same person. The other thing we do is there's an awful lot of hiding that goes behind Privacy Act and confidentiality. And I'm forever saying to people when they're talking to me is it's not a breach of confidentiality for a doctor or psychiatrist to listen to you. And people are frightened because they think it is, because that's what they get told. Yeah, so it'd be good to chat with you about it because we're looking at doing something. So I'll connect with you before we go. Yeah. Hello.
Thanks, Wendy. That was just absolutely stunning presentation to hear about the carers. And I have
Thank you.
My name is Anthea Carrins, and I work for Tasmania Care Local as a care coordinator in chronic disease. Just keep holding. I'm studying and doing honours in chronic disease, but I also work in mental health. Isn't it? But my question is, what's going to happen to the NRCP funding for respite with the rollout? Sorry, that's so patchy. What's going to happen with the rollout of my aged care with the under 65 NRCP funding for respite? Yeah, that's a real worry, isn't it?
And that's why we're continuing in partnership with COPA, because we still want to try to work through that transition. And obviously, there are a lot of measures in terms of the THO and the chronic withdrawal. So there's a whole lot of those things that are bubbling around. But we're asking questions and we're getting answers.
No, because that link to respite for carers is often their life.
One of the things that we found in the research that we anecdotally knew is that the carers are not accessing their respite because the person who provides support for them doesn't want them to. So they want to stay there for after. And so it's trying to work out those kind of main issues and really tricky. So that's why one of the proposals that we've had, they start to address some of those kind of issues. Because there's a bit more and what might be some messages and one of the questions you were asked. Some of the politicians at the moment are both at a federal and at a state level already know what questions the information asked. And it's fantastic that they're saying it to us now. And they're also saying, we can talk to a few more people in the room. We actually don't know what the questions are to ask because it's on their minds.
Don't know what's wrong with it. Well, it's working for me. There you go.
That's what?
It's working.
Just because you're dancing.
Oh, that must have been it. On behalf of all of us, Wendy, can I say thank you, not only for your dogged determination to get that money and do this project, but for your passion and enthusiasm in seeing it through and now doing something with the outcomes. And can you join me in thanking Wendy?